Hey everyone. I never thought I'd be the guy writing a long post like this, but I don't know what else to do. Maybe I just need to get it out of my system. Maybe someone will see this and give me the clarity I can't seem to find myself. My name's Michael. I'm 35 now, living in Texas with my daughter, Alice. She's the best thing that's ever happened to me, and I'd do anything to keep her safe. But to understand how I got here, I have to start from the beginning, back when I thought I had everything figured out. I used to be a hopeful athlete, one of those guys with dreams bigger than his reality. Football was my life. I had the talent, the drive, but life had other plans. A knee injury in my early 20s knocked me off track. After that, I put all my energy into engineering. It wasn't my dream, but it was stable. It was something I could build a future on. That's when I met Leanne. She was electric, the kind of woman who made everyone in the room look at her. She had this wild energy that made you feel like life with her would never be boring. At the time, I thought that was a good thing. We moved fast. Too fast, if I'm being honest. One day, she told me she was pregnant. I didn't even question it, I was thrilled. I stepped up, ready to be a father. When Alice was born, I felt like I'd finally found my purpose. She was my little girl, my whole world. But Leanne, she was different after Alice came along. Not in the way new mothers sometimes are, but in a way that made my gut twist. She was distant, cold at times. Other times, she'd flip and be overly affectionate, almost like she was overcompensating for something. Then there was Jean, her daughter from a previous relationship. Jean was a teenager, already carrying a chip on her shoulder, and she never warmed up to me. No matter how much I tried, she always looked at me like I was just some guy taking up space. Leanne brushed it off, saying Jean had trust issues from her past. I believed her. For years, I worked my tail off to provide for them. I pulled overtime, took on extra projects, made sure we had a good home. And for a while, I told myself that the cracks in our relationship were just normal stress. I ignored the way Leanne would disappear for hours with no explanation. I brushed off the way Jean would smirk at me whenever Leanne got a business call late at night. I convinced myself that love was about trust, and I had to trust the mother of my child. But trust doesn't mean closing your eyes to the truth. The first real punch to the gut came when I found out about the money. Thousands of dollars unaccounted for. When I asked Leanne, she had excuse after excuse. Bills, medical costs, a surprise for me she was saving up for. But nothing added up. Then there was the night Jean let something slip. She was mad about something. Probably that I wouldn't let her take my car out with her friends, and she spat out, "You think you're so great, don't you? If you knew half of what Mom was up to, you'd be gone already." I froze. She stormed off before I could press her for more, but that was the moment something snapped in me. I couldn't ignore it anymore. That was the beginning of the end. I started watching more closely, digging deeper. And what I found shattered everything I thought I knew about my life. I couldn't shake what Jean had said. It wasn't just some teenage tantrum. There was something in her voice, in the way she smirked, that made my stomach twist. It gnawed at me for days, but I kept quiet. I had learned a long time ago that when something feels wrong, pushing too hard too fast only makes people hide the truth better. So I waited, watched. And the more I paid attention, the more things stopped making sense. Leanne always kept her phone face down. Always. If I so much as glanced at it, she'd act playful, teasing me about trust and privacy. I had never given it a second thought before. I had trusted her completely, like an idiot. But now, every time I saw that phone, it felt like it was taunting me. So one night, after she passed out on the couch with a half-full glass of wine, I picked it up. It was locked, but she wasn't as careful as she thought. Her birthday was the passcode. The first thing I saw was a text conversation with someone saved as JT. No last name. Just initials. My gut told me everything I needed to know before I even opened it. I scrolled up, heart pounding. "I miss you. When can I see you?" "Soon. He's been watching me too much lately. I have to be careful." My fingers felt numb. My vision blurred, but I kept scrolling. The messages went back months. At first, it was just flirting, sneaky meetups, things that made my blood boil. Then I saw something that made my whole body go cold. "You sure he doesn't suspect?" "No, he's clueless. He actually believes Alice is his." He'll never leave her, which means he'll never leave me. I don't know how long I sat there. I don't even know if I was breathing. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped the phone. Alice. My Alice. The little girl who ran to me when she was scared, who wrapped her tiny arms around my neck and told me she loved me. The little girl I had promised to protect with everything I had. She wasn't mine. And Leanne had known all along. She had let me build my entire life around that little girl, knowing damn well I wasn't her father. I kept scrolling, feeling sicker by the second. You ever going to tell him the truth? Why? So he can run off and leave me struggling? He thinks she's his daughter. That's all that matters. He'll never question it. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. My hands clenched so hard around the phone my knuckles turned white. All the years I had spent breaking my back to give them a good life, all the extra hours I had worked, every sacrifice I had made, it was all based on a lie. I looked over at Leanne, passed out on the couch, completely unaware that her entire world was about to come crashing down. I could have woken her up right then and thrown the phone in her face, demanded answers, screamed at her until my throat was raw. But I didn't. Because if there was one thing I knew, it was that I couldn't afford to lose my temper. Not yet. If I wanted to protect Alice, if I wanted to make sure Leanne and Jean paid for what they had done, I had to be smart, careful, calculated. And above all else, I had to make sure I was the one who walked away from this with everything I cared about. She thought I would never question it. She had no idea what was coming. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat in the dark, staring at Leanne as she slept, her face relaxed like she hadn't spent years playing me for a fool. Every time I closed my eyes, the words kept flashing in my head. He actually believes Alice is his. He'll never question it. She thought I'd never figure it out. She thought she had me locked in. By morning, I knew exactly what I had to do. I got up early like I always did, got Alice ready for school, packed her lunch, and kissed the top of her head like nothing had changed. My heart twisted when she smiled up at me. None of this was her fault. She was innocent in all of this, and I wasn't about to let her become collateral damage in whatever twisted game Leanne and Jean were playing. Leanne was still asleep when I got back. She never woke up early unless she had to. I stood there in the doorway for a second, watching her, debating if I should just shake her awake and end it right there. But no. If I blew up now, I'd lose the one thing that mattered, Alice. I needed time to think, to plan, to make sure when I walked away from this, I took her with me. So I went about my day like everything was normal. I went to work, sat through meetings, pretended I wasn't falling apart on the inside. But the whole time, I was making calls. First to a lawyer. Then to a buddy who worked in private investigations. If Leanne thought she had me cornered, she was dead wrong. When I got home that evening, she was sitting at the kitchen table, flipping through a magazine like she didn't have a care in the world. "Hey babe," she said, giving me that fake sweet smile she always put on when she wanted something. "How was your day?" I looked at her and felt nothing but disgust. "Same as usual," I said, forcing a smile. I leaned down and kissed the top of her head, the way I always did. If she noticed my hands were shaking, she didn't say anything. I had to play the long game. Over the next few weeks, I gathered everything I could. I went through bank statements, found the money she had been siphoning away. I tracked her movements, figured out who JT was, a lowlife she had been seeing on and off for years. The worst part? Jean knew. She had known the whole time, laughing behind my back, probably waiting for the day I'd finally snap. The hardest part was acting normal around Alice. Every time I looked at her, I felt my heart break all over again. But she was mine, blood or not. No way in hell was I letting Leanne use her to keep me in this mess. Then, finally, I got what I needed. I was sitting in my truck one evening, parked down the street, when I saw Leanne leave the house. She was dressed up, tight dress, high heels, the whole thing. My PI buddy had given me JT's address, and sure enough, that's exactly where she went. I waited, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles ached. She didn't come out for hours. When she finally did, her lipstick was smudged, her hair a mess. She was laughing, practically glowing. Like she had won. Like she had pulled it off again. I started the engine and drove home. When she walked through the door, she didn't even look at me. Just breezed past like I was a piece of furniture. I followed her into the bedroom and leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "Good night." She froze, just for a second, before giving me that practiced smirk. "Yeah. Just grabbed a drink with Katie." I nodded slowly. "Right. Katie." Her eyes flicked to mine, searching, but I kept my face blank. She had no idea that her little empire was about to collapse. I had the proof. The texts. The money trails. The photos of her sneaking into JT's house. I had everything. And now? It was time to make my move. The hardest part of revenge is patience. I wanted to throw it all in her face right then, wanted to see the smug look wipe off her face when she realized she wasn't the one in control anymore. But I had to be smart. If I played this wrong, I could lose Alice. And that wasn't an option. So I waited. And I prepared. Leanne had gotten comfortable over the years, thinking she had me wrapped around her finger. She was careless with her lies, sloppy with her secrets. She had no idea I had already spoken to a lawyer, that I had opened a separate bank account and started moving my money little by little. She didn't know I had already checked. My name wasn't on the birth certificate. That was going to be her biggest mistake. That weekend, I took Alice out, just the two of us. We got ice cream, went to the park, did all the things we used to do before I started seeing the cracks in my life. She had no idea anything was wrong, and I wanted to keep it that way for as long as I could. "Daddy," she asked, swinging her little legs on the park bench, "are we gonna live here forever?" I smiled at her, ruffling her hair. "Why do you ask?" She shrugged. "I just like it here. It's safe." That nearly broke me. She had no idea what was coming. But I promised myself right then and there that no matter what happened, I would make sure she stayed safe. When we got back home, Leanne was on the phone, laughing at something, but the second she saw me walk in, she lowered her voice and turned away. That used to be normal for me. Not anymore. I kissed Alice on the forehead and sent her to her room, then turned to Leanne, who was already watching me with that fake curiosity. "Everything okay?" she asked. I leaned against the counter and just looked at her. Really looked at her. I wondered how long it had been since I had seen her for what she truly was. "I've been thinking," I said, keeping my voice even. "Maybe we should take a break." That got her attention. Her eyes narrowed, her whole body tensed. "A break?" "Yeah. I don't know, I feel like we've been off lately. Maybe some space would do us good." She let out a short laugh, shaking her head. "Where is this coming from?" I shrugged. "Just been on my mind." I saw the wheels turning in her head. She was calculating, trying to figure out if she needed to be sweet or angry. That's the thing about people like Leanne, they're always playing a role. And she decided on sweet. She came over, ran her hands up my chest, looked up at me with those eyes she used to get whatever she wanted. "Come on, baby," she murmured. "You don't mean that." For the first time in my life, her touch made my skin crawl. I pulled away, forcing a small smile. "Think about it," I said, grabbing my keys. "I'm gonna go for a drive." I walked out before she could say anything else, but I didn't go for a drive. I went straight to my lawyer's office. I had waited long enough. Leanne thought she had everything under control. She thought she could lie her way through anything. She had no idea I was about to take everything from her. The next few days were a test of control. I had all the proof I needed, but if I played my hand too soon, Leanne would go into damage control mode. I needed her to feel safe, to think I was still the same clueless idiot she had been stringing along for years. So I acted normal. I went to work, made dinner, kissed Alice goodnight. I even made small talk with Leanne, nodding along when she told me whatever nonsense she had cooked up for the day. It was disgusting how easy lying came to her. But every fake smile, every casual "love you" she threw my way, just solidified what I was about to do. The first real move came when I got the results back from the private paternity test. I had taken a strand of Alice's hair from her brush and sent it off, even though deep down, I already knew. When the envelope arrived, I didn't even hesitate. 0% probability of paternity. It was real now. No more doubts, no more small part of me hoping I had misread the texts, that maybe I had gotten it all wrong. Alice wasn't mine by blood. But that didn't change the fact that she was mine in every way that mattered. And I wasn't about to let Leanne use that against me. That night, I lay in bed next to her, staring at the ceiling while she slept peacefully, like she hadn't burned my life to the ground. I wasn't going to let her win. I had to move fast. The next morning, I got up early and made breakfast like I always did. I poured Alice's cereal, packed her lunch, and kissed her forehead when I sent her off to school. Then I walked back into the kitchen, where Leanne was sipping her coffee like nothing was wrong. "I think we should split up," I said casually, like I was commenting on the weather. She choked on her coffee. "Excuse me. I'm just not happy anymore," I said, sitting across from her. "I think it's best if we go our separate ways." I watched as her face twisted into confusion, then suspicion, then calculation. She forced a laugh, setting her mug down. "Michael, come on. What's really going on?" I shrugged. "Nothing. I've just been thinking about it, and I don't think this is working anymore." She tilted her head, studying me. "You're serious?" "Yeah." She leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "And what about Alice?" There it was. The leverage. She thought she had me in a corner. She had no idea I already had a lawyer drawing up paperwork, no idea I had financial records proving she had stolen money from me, no idea I had texts, photos, and a paternity test that would destroy her in court. I kept my expression neutral. "I'm not walking away from Alice. We'll figure it out." For the first time, I saw something flicker in her eyes, panic. But she masked it quickly, shaking her head with a small smirk. "You're being ridiculous. We're not splitting up." That's what she thought. I stood up, grabbing my keys. "We'll talk later." And with that, I walked out, leaving her sitting there, realizing for the first time that she was about to lose control. Leanne had spent years thinking she had me wrapped around her finger. But now, the game was mine to play. And I was about to make my next move. Leanne wasn't stupid, manipulative, yes, but not stupid. The moment I walked out that door, I knew she'd start digging. She'd check my accounts, my emails, maybe even my work schedule, looking for cracks in whatever story she thought I was hiding. But the thing about people like her? They never assume someone else is playing the game better than them. She didn't know I had already drained our joint account, moving every last penny I had earned into a private one under my name alone. She didn't know I had met with my lawyer twice already, gathering every piece of dirt I could use against her. She didn't know I had found a rental house across town, paid in advance, ready for the day I took Alice and never looked back. And she definitely didn't know I had spoken to Jean. It had taken everything in me to sit down across from that girl, to pretend for even a second that I didn't hate the sight of her smug little face. But I had to. Because Jean was Leanne's biggest weakness. "You want to get out from under your mom's thumb?" I had asked her, keeping my voice calm. "You help me." Jean had blinked at me, then laughed, shaking her head like I had lost my mind. But when I slid a stack of papers across the table, printouts of Leanne's stolen money transfers, screenshots of her texts with JT, all of it, the laughter stopped. "You think she's gonna protect you?" I had asked. "She's been using me for years, Jean. What makes you think she won't use you next?" She had looked at the papers for a long time, jaw clenched. And then, just like that, the game changed. So when I walked out that morning, leaving Leanne stewing in her own paranoia, I knew Jean would be doing exactly what I needed her to do, keeping her mother distracted. And it worked. That night, when I came home, I found Leanne pacing the kitchen, her face tight with frustration. Jean was sitting at the table, arms crossed, watching her like a cat waiting to pounce. "You moved the money," Leanne snapped the second I walked in. I raised an eyebrow. "What money?" "Don't play dumb with me, Michael," she hissed. I checked the account. "It's empty." "Where is it?" I shrugged, setting my keys on the counter. "My money is in my account, where it belongs." Her nostrils flared. "Our account." "No," I said evenly. "My account. The money I earned. The money you've been stealing from." Jean let out a low chuckle, and Leanne spun on her, her eyes flashing. "Shut up, Jean." Jean smirked, leaning back in her chair. "Guess Mom's little plan isn't working out, huh?" Leanne's hands curled into fists, and I saw something flicker in her eyes, something close to panic. She hadn't expected this. She thought she had all the power, but now, she was scrambling. "I don't know what you think you're doing," she said, turning back to me, her voice lowering, trying to sound reasonable. "But you need to think about Alice." I stared at her, my stomach twisting. She was still using her. Even now. "I am," I said quietly. "That's why this is happening." Her mouth opened, but before she could speak, Jean stood up, grabbing her phone. "I'm going out." Leanne barely looked at her. "No, you're not." Jean smirked. "Watch me." And just like that, she walked out the front door, leaving Leanne standing there, caught between chasing after her and dealing with me. For the first time in years, she didn't have control. And I was just getting started. Leanne was unraveling, and I could see it. She tried to keep up the act, but the cracks were showing. That fake confidence, the smug little smirks, gone. Instead, she was pacing, chewing on her nails, eyes darting toward me like she was waiting for me to explode. But I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. No, I wanted her to sit in this, to stew in the realization that she was losing control. She finally stopped pacing and turned to me. "You're making a mistake, Michael," she said, her voice calmer now, trying to sound reasonable. "We have a life together. A family." I just stared at her. Family? Was she serious? After everything? "You should sit down," I said, pulling out a chair at the kitchen table. "We need to talk." Her jaw tightened, but she sat. I stayed standing, arms crossed. I needed her to feel small, to feel trapped. "I know everything, Leanne," I said finally. "The money. JT. The truth about Alice." Her body stiffened. Just for a second. Just a quick flicker of fear before she masked it. But I saw it. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, tilting her head like I was speaking a foreign language. "You're acting crazy." I pulled out my phone, scrolled through the screenshots, and slid it across the table. "Try again." She hesitated before picking it up, her face carefully blank as she scrolled through the messages, the bank statements, the proof that I had caught her in every single lie. She put the phone down and let out a breath, shaking her head. "You went through my phone," she asked, like that was the real crime here. I let out a short laugh. "That's what you're upset about?" She leaned back, crossing her arms. "So what now, Michael? You gonna throw a tantrum? Kick me out?" "No," I said simply. "I'm taking Alice, and I'm leaving." Her eyes snapped to mine. And there it was, the real panic. "You can't just take her away from me." "She's not even mine," I said, the words feeling heavy in my throat. "But I'm still going to fight for her. And with everything I have on you, you won't win." Her lips parted like she wanted to argue, but she couldn't. She knew I was right. The texts alone showed her admitting the truth, showed her using Alice as a pawn to keep me around. A judge wouldn't look kindly on that. She let out a short laugh, shaking her head. "You think you're some kind of mastermind, don't you?" I just looked at her. "No. I think I'm a guy who finally woke up." She stood up so fast the chair scraped against the floor. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is," I said. She stormed out of the kitchen, slamming the bedroom door behind her. But I wasn't worried. She had nothing left. That night, I packed a bag for Alice and one for myself, moving them to my truck while Leanne stayed locked in the bedroom. Jean hadn't come home, and honestly, I didn't care where she was. By morning, I was ready. Alice was eating her breakfast when Leanne finally emerged. She looked like she hadn't slept, her face pale, eyes wild. "You're really doing this," she said, voice hoarse. "Yes." She looked at Alice, and for a second, something almost like regret crossed her face. But then she turned back to me, and I saw it, the coldness, the calculation. "If you walk out that door," she said slowly, "you'll regret it." I didn't even flinch. I took Alice's hand, grabbed my keys, and walked out. I had spent years being manipulated, lied to, played like a fool. But I was finally free. Driving away from that house felt surreal. I kept waiting for something to stop me, a phone call, a police siren, some last-minute trick from Leanne. But nothing happened. It was just me, Alice, and the open road. She sat in the back seat, swinging her little legs, oblivious to how much her world had just changed. "Where are we going, Daddy?" she asked, her voice light, trusting. "Somewhere better," I said, gripping the wheel tighter. I had planned this down to the last detail. I wasn't just leaving, I was disappearing. I had cash, a new place already lined up in Texas, and I'd wiped every trace of my plans from our shared accounts. I made sure there was nothing she could use against me. But Leanne wasn't the type to let go without a fight. I was 3 hours into the drive when my phone started blowing up. I ignored the first few calls, but when I stopped for gas, I checked the screen. 30 missed calls. Leanne, Jean, even some of her friends I barely knew. Then, a single text from Jean. She called the cops. I should have expected it. Leanne knew she couldn't manipulate me anymore, so she was going to play the victim. Probably telling them I kidnapped Alice, spinning some sob story about how she was terrified for her child's safety. It was classic Leanne, turning her own crimes into someone else's problem. I put my phone down and looked at Alice in the rearview mirror. She was humming to herself, completely unaware of what was happening. I wasn't going back. I took a deep breath, grabbed my wallet, and walked into the gas station. The cashier barely looked at me as I picked up a prepaid phone and paid in cash. I stepped outside, tossed my old phone into the trash, and activated the burner. I called my lawyer first. Leanne called the cops, I said as soon as he picked up. He sighed. I figured she might. Did you take Alice without warning her? Technically, yeah. But I have proof that she's unfit. The texts, the bank records, everything. That'll help. But until you get legal custody, you need to be careful. If she pushes hard enough, law enforcement might get involved. That was what I was afraid of. I thanked him and hung up. I had to keep moving. Another 6 hours on the road, and Texas finally came into view. The small rental house I had lined up was waiting for us, tucked away in a quiet neighborhood where no one knew my name. That night, as I tucked Alice into bed, she looked up at me with sleepy eyes. Are we staying here forever? I smoothed her hair back. Maybe. Mommy's not coming? I hesitated. Not for a while. She seemed to think about that, then yawned and rolled over. Okay. She trusted me completely. And I wasn't going to let her down. The next morning, my lawyer called again. Leanne's already making moves. She's claiming you kidnapped Alice. We need to file first before she builds a case against you. I ran a hand down my face. Do I have a shot? You have more than a shot. You have proof she's an unfit mother. But we need to move fast. I had spent years being blind, believing in a lie. But not anymore. Leanne wanted a war? She was about to get one. The next few days were a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and waiting. My lawyer moved fast, filing for emergency custody before Leanne could twist the story any further. The evidence I had, the stolen money, the affair, the texts about Alice not being mine, was enough to shake her credibility. But courts didn't always care about what was fair. They cared about what was legal. Leanne, of course, wasn't backing down. She started with the cops, claiming I had kidnapped Alice. It didn't stick, since I had never been abusive, never threatened her, and there was no custody order in place yet. But that didn't stop her from blowing up my new burner phone with voicemails. First, she was calm, trying to reel me back in. Michael, we can fix this. Just come home, and we'll talk. I don't want to fight you. Then, when that didn't work, she got angry. You think you can just take my daughter and run? You're insane. The cops will find you, and you'll never see her again. And finally, the desperation. Please, Michael. Just talk to me. You don't understand what you're doing. I deleted every message. I wasn't playing her games anymore. Jean, though? She was another story. A few nights in, I got a text from an unknown number. Hey. It's Jean. You need to be careful. Mom's losing it. I stared at the message for a long time, debating whether to reply. Jean had helped me in her own way, but I still didn't trust her. I had spent years in a house where she smirked at me behind my back, where she watched her mother use me like a bank account and never said a word. But if she was warning me, that meant Leanne was up to something. What is she planning? I finally typed. Jean's reply came almost instantly. She's talking to a lawyer. She's saying you're mentally unstable, that you snapped and ran off with Alice. She's trying to make you look dangerous. Of course she was. That was classic Leanne. If she couldn't win the truth, she'd rewrite it. Thanks for the heads up, I wrote back. Jean hesitated before sending another text. I don't know why I'm even telling you this. Maybe I just want to see her lose. I believed that. Jean didn't care about me, not really. She just hated her mother more. The next morning, my lawyer called. Leanne's pushing for an emergency custody hearing. I figured. We have a strong case, he assured me. But we need to be ready for her to throw everything at you. She'll lie, she'll cry, she'll do whatever it takes to make herself look like the victim. I already knew that. I had lived it for years. Let her try, I said. I had spent too much time being her pawn. Now, I was going to end the game on my terms. The court date was set faster than I expected. Leanne had wasted no time, and neither had I. My lawyer had everything prepared, the bank statements proving she had stolen from me, the messages where she admitted Alice wasn't mine, and the evidence that she had been using Alice as a way to keep me tied to her. But I knew none of that would matter if Leanne put on the performance of her life. And she did. The moment we stepped into the courtroom, she looked like a different person. Her makeup was light, her hair was pulled back, and she wore a soft-colored dress that made her look delicate, almost fragile. She even had tissues in her hand, like she had already planned to cry. I barely recognized her. When the judge asked her to speak, she let out a shaky breath, gripping the tissue like it was the only thing holding her together. "Your Honor," she said, her voice trembling, "I'm terrified for my daughter. Michael has never done anything like this before. I don't know what happened. He just snapped." I clenched my jaw. She was good. She turned to the judge, eyes wide and glistening with tears. "I've tried to reach him. I've begged him to come home to talk to me, but he won't. He won't even let me talk to Alice. I'm scared she's being manipulated. She's only a child. She doesn't understand what's happening." I wanted to laugh. Manipulated? After everything she had done, she had the audacity to paint me as the one twisting things? Then came the final act of her performance. She dabbed at her eyes and looked down, as if she couldn't even bear to say it. "Michael, he's been under a lot of stress. I think he's having some kind of mental breakdown. I don't want to take Alice from him, but I just want to know she's safe." There it was. She wasn't calling me dangerous outright, that would be too obvious. No, she was smarter than that. She was planting doubt, making it seem like she was just a concerned mother looking out for her child. The judge turned to me. "Mr. Carter, what do you have to say to these allegations?" I took a deep breath. This was it. "My ex is a liar, Your Honor," I said, keeping my voice calm, measured. "And I can prove it." I handed over the documents, and my lawyer went to work. The stolen money? Right there in black and white. The affair? The messages with JT spelled it all out. Her saying I'd never question Alice's paternity? Proof that she had deceived me for years. Leanne's fake tears dried up real quick as the judge flipped through the papers. "I'd also like to present the results of a paternity test," my lawyer added, passing another envelope to the judge. My client raised Alice as his daughter under the belief that she was his. Ms. Leanne Carter knowingly misled him. The judge read the results, then looked back at Leanne. "Ms. Carter, is this true?" Leanne sat frozen, her mouth opening and closing like she couldn't decide whether to deny it or spin it. I leaned forward slightly. "She never told me, Your Honor. I had to find out myself. And now that I know the truth, I still want to be in Alice's life. I love her, and I'm the only father she's ever known. But I will not let her be used as leverage." Silence. Leanne was pale now. She knew she had lost the upper hand. The judge sighed, setting the papers down. "I'll need time to review everything, but given the evidence presented today, I am granting Mr. Carter temporary custody of Alice until a full decision can be made." Leanne let out a sharp breath. "You can't." The judge raised a hand. "You lied about the paternity of a child and knowingly misled the court. You should consider yourself lucky that I'm not ordering a formal investigation into your conduct. This hearing is over." Leanne didn't move. She just sat there, staring at me, her hands clenched into fists. I stood up, buttoned my jacket, and walked out without another word. For the first time since this nightmare started, I had won. But something told me Leanne wasn't done yet. Leanne was quiet after court, but I knew better than to think it was over. Women like her don't just lose and walk away. No, she was regrouping, figuring out her next move. And I had to be ready. That night, I sat on the couch in my new place, watching Alice color at the dining table. She was humming to herself, kicking her feet back and forth. No idea that a war had just been fought over her. "Daddy," she said, not looking up from her picture, "when can I see Mommy?" I swallowed hard. I had been dreading this. "I don't know, sweetheart. Not for a little while." She frowned, setting her crayon down. Did she do something bad? I took a slow breath. How was I supposed to explain this to a 5-year-old? Sometimes, grown-ups don't make the best choices, I said carefully. And when that happens, we have to figure out what's best for you. Alice seemed to think about that, then picked her crayon back up. Okay. That was the thing about kids. They trusted you, even when they didn't fully understand. And I wasn't going to betray that trust. But Leanne? She had other plans. 3 days later, I got the call from my lawyer. She's fighting back. Of course she was. What's her angle? She's claiming parental alienation. That you're keeping Alice from her out of spite. I let out a bitter laugh. Did she mention that she lied about me being her father for years? She's twisting it. Saying that even though you're not the biological father, you're using this as an excuse to punish her. She's demanding visitation. I clenched my jaw. How bad is this for me? There's a chance the judge will grant her supervised visits, my lawyer admitted. But with what we have on her, she's fighting an uphill battle. That didn't make me feel any better. Leanne was good at manipulation, at twisting the truth just enough to make herself look like the victim. And I knew if she got Alice alone, she'd start working on her too. I wasn't going to let that happen. That evening, I got another text from Jean. She's freaking out. Talking about doing something big. Be careful. I stared at the message for a long time. Jean had no reason to warn me, no reason to help me at all. But she had been raised by Leanne. She had spent her whole life watching her mother lie, steal, and manipulate. Maybe she had finally had enough. I typed back, "Do you know what she's planning?" Jean took a few minutes before replying. "Not yet. But she's desperate. And desperate people do crazy things." I already knew that. The question was, just how far was Leanne willing to go? I barely slept that night. Jean's warning replayed in my head over and over. Desperate people do crazy things. And if there was one thing I knew about Leanne, it was that she didn't lose quietly. I checked the locks on my doors twice before bed. I even pulled the truck into the garage, just in case. Alice was curled up in bed, her stuffed bear tucked under her arm, completely unaware that her mother was plotting something. I had to be ready for whatever was coming. The next morning, I got the first hint. A call from an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Hello." A woman's voice came through, sharp and professional. "Mr. Carter? This is Lisa Reynolds from Child Protective Services. We received a report of possible neglect involving your daughter, Alice, and I'd like to schedule a home visit." My grip tightened on the phone. There it was. Leanne's next move. "When was this report made?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Earlier this morning." Of course. Right after she lost in court, she pulled this card. I forced myself to stay calm. What exactly was reported? I can't disclose details over the phone, but I can say that there are concerns about Alice's well-being in your care. It's routine for us to investigate all claims. I took a slow breath. I knew how this worked. CPS had to check, no matter how ridiculous the claim was. But Leanne wasn't just trying to make trouble, she was trying to paint me as unfit. If she could get CPS involved, she could use it in court, make it look like I was the dangerous one. "When would you like to come by?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "Tomorrow morning at 10, Lisa said. "I appreciate your cooperation." I hung up and immediately called my lawyer. "CPS is coming tomorrow," I said the second he answered. "Leanne reported me." He sighed. "Not surprising. But don't panic. These things happen all the time in custody battles. As long as you have a clean home and Alice is safe and happy, they won't have anything to use against you." "She's trying to set me up," I said. "She's not just fighting for custody, she wants to destroy me." "I know. And that's exactly why you need to stay calm. Let them come. Be polite, show them you have nothing to hide. They'll see through her lies." I ran a hand down my face, exhaling slowly. He was right. I had nothing to hide. But that didn't mean I wasn't furious. That night, I made sure the house was spotless. I checked Alice's room twice, making sure everything looked perfect. It wasn't for show, I took care of my daughter every single day, but I wasn't giving CPS any reason to question me. The next morning, Alice was sitting at the table eating her cereal when I heard the knock at the door. I opened it to find a woman in her late 40s, dressed in business casual, holding a clipboard. "Mr. Carter?" "Yes." "Lisa Reynolds." She nodded, stepping inside. "Thank you for meeting with me. As I mentioned on the phone, this is just a routine check. Would you mind if I spoke with Alice alone for a few minutes?" I didn't like it, but I knew refusing would only make me look bad. Of course. Alice went with her to the living room while I sat at the kitchen table, forcing myself to stay put. I could hear Lisa's soft voice, asking Alice simple questions: what she liked to do, what her favorite food was, if she felt safe with me. Alice's voice was clear, confident. "Daddy takes care of me. We play all the time. And he makes the best peanut butter sandwiches." Lisa chuckled. "That sounds nice." A few minutes later, they came back. Lisa glanced around the house, taking notes, then finally turned to me. "Mr. Carter, I see no signs of neglect or mistreatment. Alice seems happy and well cared for. I'll file my report, but I don't see any reason for concern." I let out the breath I'd been holding. "Thank you." She gave me a small smile. "I'll be honest, Mr. Carter, this happens a lot in custody disputes. Parents try to weaponize CPS to get an edge in court. But we don't take sides. We look at facts." "Leanne's not going to stop," I said. Lisa sighed. "Then neither should you." I walked her to the door, watching as she drove away. The moment she was gone, I pulled out my phone and texted Jean. She called CPS on me. It didn't work. Jean replied almost instantly. "She's pissed. You just made things worse for her." "Good. Let her be mad. Let her realize that every trick she tried was only making me fight harder. I wasn't just going to win this custody battle. I was going to bury her." Leanne had nothing left. The CPS visit had backfired, her lies were crumbling, and every move she made only pushed the court further in my favor. The final custody hearing was just a formality at this point. She sat across from me in the courtroom, her face pale, hands clenched in her lap. She didn't even try to cry this time. She knew it wouldn't work. The judge didn't waste time. With all the evidence, her financial manipulation, the affair, the deception about Alice's paternity, the decision was clear. "I am granting full legal custody to Mr. Carter," the judge said, his voice final. "Ms. Carter will have no custodial rights at this time. Any future visitation will be supervised and determined at the court's discretion." It was over. Leanne didn't move at first. Then, slowly, she turned to me. Her lips parted, like she wanted to say something, but no words came. For the first time, I saw it. True fear. Not of losing me, not of regret, just the realization that she had lost control. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I just stood, nodded at my lawyer, and walked out of that courtroom without looking back. That night, I sat outside on the porch, watching Alice chase fireflies in the yard. She laughed, her face glowing in the soft light, free from all the chaos her mother had tried to trap us in. For the first time in years, I felt it. Peace. Leanne was my past. Alice was my future. And we were finally free.